everyone. Thank you so much for your patience as everyone's getting logged in. Just wanted to let you know we experienced some technical difficulties. I think this is the most capacity our Zoom was able to hold, and we changed capacity last minute. So I think we're just struggling with some that, which is a good problem to have. One of the things that we believe in here at Mass Liberation is that perfection is a notion of white supremacy. So we do not seek for perfection. We seek to get by and enjoy ourselves while we do it. I think we're just still letting folks in. Lots of new faces, lots of folks. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. And then some familiar faces we see here too. Welcome, everyone. Hi. And hello.
Welcome in, everybody. We'll get started in just a moment. Thank you so much for being here.
Lola and Mass Lib team, is that a good angle for the graphic recording? Or should we get, like, just for the larger picture, is that far enough away, or do you need it farther or closer?
Speak one more time, Zarada. Oh, there we go.
Is that a close enough? Do you need me farther away so you can capture all of this?
That's good. That looks great. That looks great. As long as you're panning, you should be good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Still more and more folks coming in, letting more folks in. Every time I let more folks in. We're at 230 people. Thank you for everyone showing up. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. All right, still a few more folks joining. Thank y'all for your patience. Couple more, couple more. All right. We're gonna go ahead and go live here, I think, on Facebook. I wanna check in with you, Gabe. Gabe, how's everything looking on the technical side of the house?
Heard that on live in 1 minute.
Uh-oh, could you repeat that?
I heard that going live in 1 minute.
Right on. Thanks, John, for your comment. We're excited too. Yeah, Pam, there definitely was an issue. Sorry about that, but we got it squared away. Thanks for folks chiming in on the chat. Just a few more people to let in. All right. I think we can go ahead and get started. Folks have been really patiently waiting, and we appreciate you for that. Are we good on Facebook Live, folks? All right. All right, Gabe. I'm gonna go ahead and get started.
Oh, should be live very soon.
So welcome, everyone. My name is Lola. I'm with Mass Liberation Arizona. If you don't know who we are a Black Liberation Centered, directly impacted-led organization that works primarily in South Phoenix. That is one of the most heavily police incarcerated and paroled geographies in all of Arizona, if not the country, really. When Arizona is ranked 5th in the nation for its incarceration rates, a large number of those people are coming from South Phoenix. And that's where we organize. That's where I grew up. Before we get deep into this, for some of you who may not be familiar with Zoom, there's going to be a little tutorial. It's going to be a fun one. Ashley Hare is going to guide us through an exercise to get us familiar with the chat functionality and just how to use the application. But before that, there's just a couple of other things I want to share with you. If you're not already using your video function, we invite you to do that because most of us are socially distancing. We don't get to see each other's faces a lot, so it means a lot to us to see smiling faces. If you haven't yet already, please update your name and your pronoun preferences. You can do that by hovering over the participants piece of your toolbar. It's also participants in your phone. I think your toolbar is in different places depending on what type of phone you have. But if you click on participants and you hover over your name, it'll give you the opportunity to rename yourself. You just take a minute to do that. It'll help us to know whose smiling face we're smiling at and what pronouns you prefer. And then also, like I mentioned, there's a chat. I hope everyone stays muted. Okay, good. There's a chat function. This is an interactive event. Ashley's going to show us how to use the chat, but just so you know, we're hoping to hear from you. We'll do our very best to feed back and chat with you. Folks, we are on Facebook Live as well. Those of you who are on Facebook, we just want you to know there's a 20-second delay, so bear with us as we navigate that. With that, I'm gonna try to push through this because we are behind. I want to share with you just a little bit about what to expect for tonight. This is a forum. It's brought to you by Mass Liberation Arizona, but it's also co-hosted with other organizations and partners who share our vision for a world without prisons. I'm going to share a little bit about each partner organization, and because these are the wonderful people who are helping us do this work. And also, if you want to get involved, really think about these organizations as folks to reach out to. One of our partners is Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro. Black Lives Matter is Phoenix Metro is an all-inclusive abolitionist collective that challenges police brutality. They value all Black lives. This includes queer, trans folks, disabled folks, undocumented folks, folks with records, women, and all Black lives along the gender spectrum. I'm gonna just go ahead and take an opportunity to invite everyone to mute themselves if you haven't already. We hear some folks in the background. Also, we have Black Phoenix Organizing Collective, also known as BIPOC. They are an organization that builds Black political power in Phoenix. They organize young, radical, queer, poor families, formerly incarcerated and non-binary Black folks. They've organized with directly impacted people. They also challenge unjust systems in order to create a bigger, better, Blacker future for Phoenix. Also here tonight is Trans Queer Pueblo. Trans Queer Pueblo, also known as TQP, is a base-building racial and gender justice organization collectively governed by 400 or more trans, queer, undocumented, and documented migrants and people of color in Arizona. TQP creates cycles of mutual support and generates leadership and community power to transform our cities toward fellowship, family, community autonomy, leadership, and self-determination. Also here tonight is Poder in Action, which is a human rights organization in Phoenix that builds power to disrupt and dismantle systems of oppression and to determine a liberated future as people of color in Arizona. We also have Drinking Gourd Farms. Drinking Gourd Farms is building a movement of Black gardeners and farmers focusing on the physical, mental, and spiritual health of Black people through agriculture, political education, environmental stewardship, and culture-rich, healthy cooking. They are developing a collective Black food sovereignty practice across Phoenix that is securing independent, community-determined, healthy food sources that liberate Black people from the industrialized food system. And last but certainly not least, we have our friends at Lucha, also known as Living United for Change in Arizona. It is a membership-led grassroots organization that builds power with Arizona's working families to advance social, racial, and economic justice for all. Throughout grassroots campaigns, leadership, development, advocacy, and civic engagement, Lucha works to create an Arizona in which every person enjoys equal rights and opportunities to protections. So that is our organizational landscape for tonight. All of our organizations and our memberships have been invited to participate and really watch closely what happens tonight. This is a very important race for Black and Brown LGBTQIA+ folks, because these are the people most directly impacted by what happens in the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. I know some of the members of our community reached out to me and said, I don't really know what MCAO is. I don't know what that office does. So I'm going to lay a little bit of context. I'm, again, moving really quickly because we're behind, but I just want to make sure everybody understands really what we're dealing with tonight. So I'll set this context for you and then show you a short video. So the MCAO and other institutions that make up the prison industrial complex are part of a system of that was inherited by American slavery and Jim Crow. So they have historically both enforced and legitimized slavery, segregation, and disenfranchisement of Black people in America. Prosecutors can't really distance themselves from the inherently violent and racist history that as they occupy these offices, especially if they've been elected. So that's why we're asking tonight, when will Black Lives Matter to prosecutors? I'm going to turn it over to Gabe, who's going to show us a short video that gives us a better understanding of what the MCAO is about and some of the problematic policies that we have in our office today. We are not hearing sound.
These systems help create what we call a carceral state, which inflicts violence directly. Do Black Lives Matter to prosecutors? Join Mass Liberation Arizona as we take a look at how the policies and culture of the Maricopa County Attorney's Office have created a state of mass incarceration in Arizona. The prison industrial complex includes systems of policing, prosecution, sentencing, and parole, also known as reentry. These systems help create what we call a carceral state, which inflicts violence directly on our communities by keeping so many of us in cages. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office has historically enforced a culture of punitive justice, a system based solely on punishment, with policies and practices that lack transparency and public accountability. As the most popular according to the 2020 World Population Review. In fact, a 2018 study by Prison Policy Initiative revealed that Arizona locks up 877 per 100,000 people in jails, prisons, immigration detention centers, and juvenile justice facilities. And just like the rest of the country, these fundamentally racist sentencing policies lock up and disproportionately impact Black, indigenous, and people of color in our state the most, with especially harsh sentencing for LGBTQIA community members. And we know who's responsible for creating the state of mass incarceration in Arizona. Advocates have long called for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office to help end the key policies and punitive measures used by prosecutors to lock our people up. So just as police kill us in the streets with physical violence, prosecutors kill us in the courts with racist policies and long sentences. Enough is enough. We will no longer tolerate the violence and harm that policing and prosecution cause our people. Join us as we ask the 2020 Maricopa County Attorney candidates, when will Black Lives Matter to prosecutors?
Thanks, Gabe, for that. So that's just a little background on the power of the prosecutor's office and what systems that we have in place right now that we're really trying to change. I'm also going to share with you our platform. We developed a 10-point platform, and Gabe, if you could pull that up on the screen too for folks to just follow along. Let's see if those are coming up in the process of pulling those up. So our 10-point platform at Mass Liberation, we spent the last 2 years holding town hall meetings, listening sessions, one-to-one meetings with our community. We've been in neighborhoods, prisons, unsheltered communities, and we've really taken our time to create this 10-point platform on policies that we believe that the next Maricopa and Pima County attorneys must uphold to transform their office and help us end mass incarceration as a community. We acknowledge and understand the inherent conflict as an abolitionist organization in working within a system where we're seeking to dismantle that system at the same time. But it's our commitment to abolition that remains as we we demand that these changes happen for our community. So it's not about reform or restructuring. It's about demanding measures that actually take apart the system, shrink the system until prisons are no longer what people feel are an answer to harm. I'm gonna just check here. Gabe, were you able to pull the platform up?
Your email disappeared on me.
No problem. I'm just going to run us through it so that you understand what that platform is consists of. And when I do, just understand that there is a platform that is an issue, and then there's a demand that goes with that platform issue that we demand for the county attorney's office. So as you candidates are listening to this platform, know that as we talk about the category, the secondary thing is the demand. Our very first thing that we want to talk about is transparency. We have a demand that county attorney, the next county attorney holds prosecutors accountable. We want to see, our number two, a reduction in the office. Our demand for you is to lobby for budget reductions to shrink that office. Number three, we expect you to treat children like children. So that means our demand is to stop prosecuting children as adults. Number four, we want you to stop punishing poverty. That means that we want to see an end to cash bail. Number five, we want you to stop criminalizing people with mental health issues. And so that demand means we want to see alternatives to incarceration for those folks. Number six, we want to stop state-sanctioned separation of families and violence against children. That means our demand is do not participate with DCS proceedings and to lobby for the end of incarceration as a form of neglect in DCS cases. Number seven, we expect the next county attorney to ensure that debts to society are paid in full. That means we expect you to lobby for expungement. Number eight, we want an end to the death penalty and natural life sentences. We believe natural life sentences are tantamount to the death penalty, which means that our demand for you is not to seek the death penalty or any natural life sentences. Number nine is that we ask that you address the conditions of confinement. Our demand is that you seek alternatives for incarceration for LGBTQIA+, undocumented and other vulnerable people, people who are vulnerable to violence in carceral spaces. And last but certainly not least, our demand around community-based alternatives to incarceration and community healing is that you do not seek incarceration as a first response to any harm. So that is our platform. Those are our expectations of our next county attorney candidate. As abolitionists, as I mentioned before, this is a struggle for us to even imagine supporting folks who are going to take on this role in our community. We're going to dig in now. We're going to pass things over to Ashley here, but before I do, I'm just going to give you an idea of what to expect for the evening. Ashley's going to take us through an activity, short but sweet, to help us understand how to use the chat function. After that, we're going to check in with a graphical facilitator. I am going to introduce to you the graphical facilitator, Zoraida. I think that, oh, here we go. Zoraida Ettrick. She is our graphical facilitation artist. And for those of you who are not familiar with graphical facilitation, it's an art of taking salient points from a discussion and synthesizing them into images. It ends with a dynamic and engaging visual representation of what was discussed. So tonight we're going to check in with her multiple times, and she's going to share out with us a final draft of what she has heard from tonight's events. And after we check in with her a few times, we are going to close out the night with a call to action. We have segments tonight of questions. We have one set of questions that are going to be around our mass liberation values. We're going to ask candidates what they believe within the context of what mass liberation's values are. And then we're going to have a second section where we're going to talk about, we're going to go into a deep dive around their policies and what promises they make to change policy. And then finally, right before we check in with our graphical facilitator, we're going to open things up to the audience for questions and answers. As we know, it's been a night of technical issues, so we are going to definitely have to cut that piece short. But I will say to you that even if that is the case, we will do our best to encourage candidates to receive the questions that we receive in our chats and then ask them to respond to them on their social pages. But one thing I do want to level set for our expectations for our community is that I know that we all have questions and it is really important for those to get out. There is a likelihood that all of our questions, even the ones we asked that are prepared for us tonight, won't get answers. Our prosecutor's office has a history of invisibilizing our people. We are trying to disrupt that by making questions visible, and we expect that these folks here tonight will answer those, but we all know that we won't be able to change a system that was designed to invisibilize us overnight. So we know that as politicians, that folks don't necessarily represent our people, especially prosecutors. So we just want to level set expectations. There is a good chance that you won't get your questions answered, but we can still come back and send questions out to candidates later. And with that, I am going to pass things over to Ashley here to get us started on our Zoom tutorial.
Thanks, Lola. I appreciate that introduction. I will be super quick. What we wanted to do before we dived right into the conversation that Sharifa will be moderating tonight is we wanted to ensure, because culturally we are humans who break the fourth wall and we engage with each other and we love each other, and we can't do that physically and emotionally or physically, vocally together, but we can do it emotionally and send energy and move things around. And so I'm honored to be here. I'm a board member of Mass Lib, as well as a co-founder of Reframe Youth Arts Center in South Phoenix, housing art at the intersection of social justice. So because I also run an art center, we will also move our bodies a little bit. Oftentimes we forget to move our bodies because we live in such a heady space. So I encourage you. It's just some light stretching. I won't follow you through it, but as we go through these questions, I encourage you to roll your head, roll your shoulders, move your body, because oftentimes we forget to nurture our body, especially when we're going through things that are very violent to our soul. And so we just need to nurture everything in our being. So you could follow my stretches, you could do your own stretches, but I encourage you to move and shake and breathe as we do this. And you could turn your video camera off too if you're super shy about it. That's okay, but we hope you come back so we can see your wonderful face during the presentation. So first thing, if you've never been on Zoom before, at the bottom of your screen, there's a thing called reactions, and you can either send a thumbs up or you can send a clap. So the first thing we'd love for you to do is just send a clap. If you can, clap, clap, clap. Clap. Hey, look at that. That's nice. Then the next thing you could do, if you agree with something that you're feeling tonight, is you can always do a thumbs up in your reactions. Let's see some thumbs ups. Hey. And Facebook Live, we know you're with us. We're going to see your energy as well. So you should thumb up in person if you can't, if you're not with us on Zoom. Awesome. Great, so everyone knows how to use reactions. I hope that you use those tonight. That would be great. How do we clap with brown hands? That is a wonderful question. I don't know the answer to that. That's the first time I've seen a brown hand. I'm super excited about it. I learned something new. So I love that you are already using the chat box. Someone please, if your brother and sister that you see on here is asking you questions like, how do I get my brown hands? Or how do I change my background so it looks like I'm in the ocean, like some people have? Like, we encourage you to be interactive in the chat box tonight with each other. So Facebook Live and Zoom, I'm gonna throw a couple of questions at you, and you'll have about 90 seconds, about a minute. Let's do a minute, just because of time. But we'll give you time to really think about it for a second and then put it into the chat box. Just so we can learn who's in the space and just be in community with each other for a little bit. So I'm gonna sit up a little bit so I can stretch when I do this. because I haven't really stretched today. But so the first question that you'll put in the chat and Facebook Live, because we do have Mass Lib folks who are watching the Facebook Live and gathering all your questions and answers. So please interact on Facebook Live. Your first question is, what's one thing that brings you joy? What's one thing that brings you joy? And we just want you to put it in the chat. Thank you to all the folks who are stretching your bodies and nurturing yourself. Look at this, my family and cookies and sunshine and freedom and food and dogs and movement. Delicious food, weird art, helping others, gardening, sleeping. Look at this joy. Black unity. The pedicure I'm getting right now. You go. I see somebody trying to get a pedicure at the same time, getting their liberation. Star Wars. Coffee, pie. Wonderful. This is great. Smiles from strangers. Self-love is vital. My chickens. Something we often don't do in Zoom chat, as well as in-person meetings, is we don't take time to just sort of sit. People think that silence is awkward, but constantly talking isn't necessarily communication. It's one of my favorite lines from one of my favorite movies. So make sure you're taking time just to look at the chat and seeing all the beautiful things from your brothers and sisters who are and gender nonconforming beautiful humans who are loving themselves in this chat. Beautiful. Boba. I miss going to the boba spot. Awesome. Brings me joy when organizers make space for this, even when they're behind schedule. Nice. Whoever says raining in the desert. Nice. Thank you for sharing what brings you joy. The next question that I want to offer into the space, and I'll be a little silent on this and I'm going to stretch some more and give it about 60 seconds so we can really see what comes in, is we'll dig a little bit deeper. The second question is, what makes you feel listened to? Like really listened to? What's one thing that makes you feel like someone is truly and deeply listening to you? Mm. Mm. That's beautiful. Mm. I see you, Facebook. Keep coming. That's sweet. Mm. And our tech team in the back, thank you so much for continuously putting the question in the chat and being there. I'd love to grab some of these. They're really, really beautiful. And love to see them in one of those word collages, right? To see the ones that come up a lot. It's great. Awesome. I think I'm actually going to hold here and not do the last one. I think it's really important, especially during this candidate forum, as well as we move forward as a unit and as a community in this time of revolution, to really think about the ways that we need to be listened to. And there's some really beautiful, meaningful things that are coming out of here. And I wonder how we can continue to do these as we are physically distancing from each other, but not emotionally and spiritually distancing from each other. And so I want to hold these, and I want to hold these in hopes that the candidates are truly looking at the ways in which people feel listened to, as well as all of your beautiful humans who are beside you in the streets and on Zoom, to really make this liberation possible. Thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful, y'all. Thank you so much. Please continue to use the chat box. We want to continue to nurture your voices in the chat box, hear what you have to say, what you agree with, what you don't agree with, what's not sitting well with you, how you're feeling, right? And so please continue to use the chat box, because just because things are happening vocally here and on video doesn't make the chat box less important on Zoom or Facebook Live. So we really want to give time and space and energy for that. So we'll hold there. Thank you so much for interacting. Don't forget your thumbs ups, and I hope you find them in all beautiful shades of colors tonight. I'm gonna pass it to my dear, beautiful girl, Sharifa, who's gonna lead us and as the moderator tonight, and so honored to be with all of you in spirit, even though we can't be with each other physically. So have a good night. Sharifa?
Thank you, Ashley. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to be supporting in some of the facilitation and transition of the different conversations. I want to lead with the facilitator agreements so that our candidates can, when it's their time to speak, but I also want all of the community members to know that this is your space, that the candidates are here as guests, and the goal is to hear community voice and for candidates to answer to the community. So in the facilitator agreements, I ask first that you allow for imperfection. If anything happens with the technology, it'll be fine, and I will text in the text box for someone to keep going. And so just allow for imperfection, which you have already. Candidates allow for respectful interruption. You are going to receive 2 minutes. The candidates will receive 2 minutes to respond. You're asked to hold your own timers as well, but there will be a time for us that we will be holding you to. Candidates will be notified by 30 seconds when you have 30 seconds left. If I will respectfully interrupt. If you don't finish quickly, your mic will be turned off. And then you already have an order that you agreed upon that you will go in. And I can only see a couple of, like I can only see Julie's face in my screen right now. I don't see Will's face or Bob's face, but you all are going in kind of a rotation, first, second, third with Julie, then Will, then Bob. And I'll call on you when those times are ready. And then we ask everyone, as Ashley said, to please participate in the chat, be engaged. If there is questions, please note that there is a question so that we can collect those questions as we go into the Q&A segment. And so the first first we're going to allow the candidates to introduce themselves. They'll have 2 minutes each, 6 minutes total, 2 minutes each to introduce themselves. And then once they have introduced themselves, each of the organizations will share a value. They'll have time to have 3 to 5 minutes of context around a value. And then they will ask their question. And then each candidate will have an opportunity, 2 minutes to respond to that question in the order, the first rotation being Julie, Will, and then Bob. So Julie? You will receive 2 minutes to introduce yourself, and then Will, and then Bob.
All right, can everybody hear me? Gosh, what a great intro this evening. I can tell you how profoundly strange it is being a people person and wanting to be with you all tonight and look into your eyes and be able to actually be, you know, sitting next to you as we have these discussions. It's so very strange to be behind, you know, this screen instead. But for those who have not met me, hello, I'm Julie Gunnigal. I was born, raised, and educated here in the Valley. I am the mom of 3, and I'm a former prosecutor of politicians. I hold a degree in chemistry from Northern Arizona University and a law degree with honors from Notre Dame. I started out as a small town prosecutor, and I was later tapped to join the Financial Crime and Public Corruption Bureau in Cook County, Illinois, where I primarily prosecuted Chicago politicians and corporations who broke the law and stole public money. I am a recognized scholar on organized crime. My work has been repeatedly cited to the United States Supreme Court. And today I practice civil law, focusing on education, reproductive justice, and I'm going on my 14th year of practice this year. But I came to running for office in a very different way. You see, I have a child who is not neurotypical, but also has, you know, profound gifts. And when we moved back to Arizona to raise our family and to put him in school here, and it was the very same, you know, preschools and public schools that I attended, I discovered quickly how under-resourced Arizona had become. And as I went down to the legislature, it was clear why. It was clear that those who represent us don't have community values in mind. And it was clear that there were conflicts of interest that were happening openly on the floor of our legislature that quite honestly would be illegal back in Chicago where I practiced. So I'm running on a fairly straightforward platform. I want to get this office's priorities straight. It should be the first duty of this office to prosecute crimes like public corruption, crimes of violence, and those that would target women, children, and our seniors. It should also—
Thank you, Julie. Julie, your last, thank you, Julie. I don't know if you saw the text in the chat. You didn't? I tried to text you 30 seconds. Will, can you provide 30 seconds? Will, can you start your 2-minute introduction?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharifa. I'm truly honored to be here. I know how hard it is for many of us to trust somebody who's running for this office, so I'm grateful to have this chance. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Will Knight, pero soy inmigrante colombiano. Nací en la ciudad Popayán, a little bit southwest of Bogota, and I have the privilege of also being born with dual citizenship. I'm running for Maricopa County Attorney because I've been directly impacted, because my family had to flee cartel violence, and because my biological father went to federal prison for selling drugs when I was 4 years old, and because I've been otherized and criminalized. When I was 18 years old, I was arrested for an underage DUI misdemeanor, and it was a dumb thing to do, but it was actually that experience that set me on the path that brings me before you today. I was sitting in that jail cell as a teenager, terrified that I would end up like my dad. So instead, I dedicated my life to helping my community. Now I'm a Valley-educated lawyer with experience in civil rights and as a public defender. I'm also an educator at my alma mater and a community leader who has spent his career fighting for diversity in the profession and on the bench. My 3-point platform is simple. It's streaming over my head. We're going to end mass incarceration. We're going to hold law enforcement accountable for crying out loud. And we're going to give our community a voice in the justice process. These have been my priorities since day one, not just all of a sudden now that it's no longer controversial to say Black Lives Matter. And it is so important because in 2016, there were more than 500,000 eligible Black, Latinx, indigenous voters who didn't cast ballots. And why would they? When in our 150-year history, we have never had a Black or Latinx county attorney. That's my commitment. I'm running because, not in spite of my background, but because of it. Because as a directly impacted immigrant here in 1070 country, I'm the candidate that this movement needs. That's why I've been endorsed by powerful advocates for racial justice like Planned Parenthood. And that's why I'm going to serve you not as your top cop, but as your Chief Justice Enforcement Officer. Thank you.
Bob, can you hear me? Bob McWhirter? McWhirter?
Bob is muted,
There.
Gabe. Can someone?
Good. I think somebody unmuted me now. So,
Yes. Thank you, Bob.
obviously, I too now know what it's like to not have a voice. So thank you very much. My name is Bob McWhirter, and I too am running for Maricopa County Attorney. I grew up here in the Valley as well, went to ASU. After that, I went to Peru, where I spent a year teaching in a special education school in the slums of Lima, Peru. And that's where I became fluent in Spanish. I later went to law school, worked for a Supreme Court justice, and worked for 17 years in the Federal Public Defender's Office, representing the most marginalized people in society. I then fought against the death penalty. I'm the only lawyer here who's first chair qualified to defend against capital cases. I worked in El Salvador for a year, administering a U.S. aid package to reform the courts and the justice system and the police, exactly what we need here. But I'll tell you what really kind of finally got me to decide to run was I realized that no matter how hard I worked as a criminal defense lawyer and no matter how well I did, it didn't matter because this system is so geared to mass incarceration, punitive approaches to everything. And I just couldn't keep doing that without trying to do a little bit better, to try to change it. And it's this office that can facilitate the change that we need. That's why I ran. And the fact that I have 3 Latin children, Latinx children, who are impacted directly as much as anybody else. When Antonio Arce was shot by a police officer and killed, the 14-year-old child, that officer wasn't charged with anything. This was a 14-year-old child who had a toy gun and his back was turned. That child could have been one of my children. And that's what has impacted me. And that's what has directed me to run. So thank you. I've got 10 seconds to spare and let's just keep going. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bob. We will now transition. Thank you to all the candidates and thank you for allowing me to respectfully interrupt. I know it's jarring the first time, but it'll get cleaner as we go along. We will now hear from the community partners. The first is Hira from Transqueer Pueblo. Hira is still muted.
Hello? Hello?
There you go.
There we go. Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Hira. I'm a Transqueer Pueblo. And I'm here to speak a little bit about why the system isn't broken, why it's designed that way. So at Transqueer Pueblo, we strive to build holistic communities. This means understanding that we aren't just an LGBT organization. We aren't just a migrant organization. We aren't just a Latinx organization. And when we look at how parts of our society are structured, we see a common thread around sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, and more importantly, racist morality. Because part of understanding what criminalization is, we must understand these morals. So we define criminalization as making people's identities and behaviors into a crime. And for those that don't know, there are elders in the LGBTQ movement who can still remember a time when being trans was criminalized through anti-cross-dressing laws. But before there was ever even a Stonewall, colonization played a huge role in demonizing same-gender relationships and sexuality, as well as two-spirit, third, fourth, and fifth gender community, as a way of maintaining that being cisgender and heterosexual was the only moral way of being. And we see how actually a lot of laws were built to reinforce these morals. As an example, in Arizona, we have a very vague anti-prostitution laws. But somehow, the people that are criminalized for engaging in sex work are mostly women, more specifically, Black women and trans women of color. And these laws are so vague that we all do them. If you've ever been in public and waved or hailed a car or done any bodily gesture or spoke with anyone on the street, you have committed an intent to solicit prostitution. So why is it that we see such a huge focus around Black women and trans women of color? Well, because these laws are actually targeting actions that women shouldn't do. A woman shouldn't draw attention to herself. A woman shouldn't be sexual. A woman should be talking with other people. And so this is why we say the system isn't broken. It's designed this way. These morals and this criminalization is designed to, is designed with a racist, with a xenophobic, with a sexist and homophobic intent, moral. And so, please share. And I think that that's it for me.
Do you see the question? I can ask it. Candidates, the question is, please share. Do you see it? Do you want to keep going, Hida?
Yes, thank you. So please share with us how you understand racism and transphobia to be a systemic design of the county attorney's office.
And so Julie, you can answer first if you need me to put that question in the chat so that you can see it, if it hasn't already been placed there.
No, I think I got it. Let's talk.
Okay. Your timer starts.
It is absolutely undeniable that racism and homophobia and transphobia and misogyny is a feature and not a bug of the criminal justice system. If we want to look explicitly to what the outcomes are, we know that disproportionately at every stage of the criminal justice system, that certain individuals are target while others are not. We know that the war on drugs was explicitly racist. Looking back to the Nixon administration, we know that when Ehrlichman started these grand designs for federal war on drugs, that it was the targeting of people of color that they had in mind. So to that end, I think the bigger question, once we acknowledge it, and I know that we've gone decades without acknowledging it here in Arizona, is what to do about it. My platform, and you can find more at gunnagle2020.com, in part addresses the best practices for those communities who have best been able to dismantle systemic racism and homophobia and transphobia and misogyny that's built into the criminal justice system. It's being selective about which crimes you prosecute. It's having your priorities straight. It's taking crimes that involve mental health issues and drug abuse and taking those out of the system and into treatment where they belong. So that's what I would do with a county attorney's office. You can see my bold platform and the reforms that we could make primarily as a day one office as well. Everyone should keep in mind that so much of what happens in this office can run through the legislature because we are a system of laws, but so much of it is priorities, and that's what can be changed if we get a reform-minded prosecutor.
Thank you, Julie. Will, would you like to answer the same question? Does anyone else want to respond to Julie's question?
There we go. It wouldn't let me unmute myself. Sorry about that. I agree 100%. It's hard to deny that the system wasn't intentionally designed to be racist and to be transphobic. Just look at the punishment and conviction exception that we intentionally carved out of the 13th Amendment, or the origins of local police agencies with fugitive slave patrols. So it shouldn't be surprising to us that it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. That Black and brown bodies and LGBTQ+, particularly trans men and women, and Black trans women, most of all, are being disproportionately impacted, disproportionately caged, and disproportionately murdered by law enforcement. To paraphrase Brian Stevenson, we are burdened by our history of injustice, and it shapes every way that we think, act, and enforce the law. These things aren't new. I mean, we've been crying for justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and recently Rayshard Brooks from Atlanta, which is where I grew up. But Ed Mallett, you might be a name you remember, and that was only 25 years ago here in Phoenix, a 25-year-old unarmed paraplegic Black man who was murdered by the Phoenix Police Department with a chokehold in 1994. We cried for justice back then, and that wasn't even close to the beginning. So I commend the efforts, excuse me, of the activists and the leaders in each of the groups that's hosting this forum right now. Your inspiring vision to reimagine our conception of criminal justice and transform it entirely is beautiful. But to be realistic, we're not going to end racism in November. It's going to be a long journey. So my promise to you is that I have the most aggressive and comprehensive plan to end mass incarceration, to reduce the contributions to our jails and prison systems by 50% my first term. And that is the most comprehensive plan of anybody that's running for this office. And I think we can do even more in my second. Thank you.
Bob, do you want to answer? I know you're still muted. Do you want to respond? He's still muted.
Hi there. Can we hear me? Yeah. I just want to add a little thing, which is probably very well known to at least this group. If you want to just have a specific example, a hard example of the embedded racism, just look at the long history of the disparate treatment between powdered and crack cocaine and the way it was punished for the same amount of drug, but one was a drug that was used by white people and the other was a drug that was used by primarily persons of color. And they were totally differently punished, much more severely. The other perfect example, and one of the problems we have is we don't have good numbers, but we do have numbers on marijuana prosecution. And the ACLU did a comprehensive study which showed that a black or brown person in Maricopa County is 4 times more likely to be charged with a marijuana offense than a white person. But these are tangible things that we can see to show the disparate treatment and race in this system. And that is insufferable and has to change. And that's my commitment. Thank you.
Sharifa, there's no sound there. I'm wondering if there's a microphone check. Sharifa?
Oh, it's me. Thank you, candidates. The next community member we'll hear from is Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro, Miriam.
Hello, everybody. One of the values that I kind of want to discuss with everybody today was how we should center Black liberation and how we believe that here at BLM Phoenix Metro and Massive and the other orgs as well. So basically, as mentioned, the criminal punishment industry stems directly from the anti-Black violence present in chattel slavery. So never has there not been a moment in the United States history where Black bodies were harshly and disproportionately criminalized. So that's kind of what we're seeing now in the prosecutor's office. As we know, some of the first forms of policing were slave patrols. And as we know, the office itself is systemically racist and anti-Black in particular. So it was built to prosecute Black bodies. That's why we must center Black bodies in getting liberation from the prosecutor's office. And the violence it perpetuates on our communities and continues to do throughout history. And so how can you change that historically, right? So that's why we feel like we must center Black survival and Black life moving forward when we're talking about this. So the question that we have for y'all with that in mind and that historical grounding in mind when it comes to Black folks in particular, so how are you going to abolish the anti-Black violence in the Maricopa County Attorney Office and redistribute resources into the development of the Black community?
Thank you, Miriam. Will, you are set to go this segment first. Oh no, I'm still supposed to be doing the same rotation. Julie?
Hi there. In 2 minutes, it's really difficult to get to the whole of the plans that can really help I think, empower the Black community and to reduce the racism that's inherent in our system. Let me see if I can hit you with the high points. I have been supportive of the reallocation that should be happening within the Phoenix City Council. And I think we all should be putting pressure on our city council to divest from a militaristic police system that we have here in Phoenix and to reinvest that money in the community. It has to be done with aggressive lobbying that goes through our legislature. It has to be done with community support and involvement. One of the parts of my platform that has been there since day one is that we need a round table of everyone who is directly impacted by the criminal justice system to help advise this office and continue to have those voices. I think that transparency is a big key in this too. We don't even know the scope and extent of the racial disparities that have happened in this office because this has been one of the most opaque offices in history. We have had instances where the county attorney has waited almost years to turn over public documents. And what I am proposing in order to really bring sunlight on this is that sort of radical transparency. Because we need to know which cases are being charged on behalf of which victims, how race is involved in every step from charging to plea agreements to dispositions and eventual sentencing. So, and learn more at Gunnagle 2020 for everything I can't cover in 2 minutes.
Thank you, Julie. Will?
Thank you so much. We feature Black voices, especially Black women who are once again leading this movement. We listen to Black voices and we uplift Black voices and the Black community. So from the beginning, I reached out to all of my friends and colleagues who have been leaders in these movements, and I have engaged from day one, all of them. I committed to holding myself accountable to Black women and to Black voices from the beginning by making sure that my campaign team was diverse and reflective, and not just with some folks working with me or for me. I mean, at the top, I have people of color and Latinas and Black women consulting with me, advising me as general consultants, advising me as my campaign chairs, advising me as my managers. So I'm truly listening to the leaders in our community that know so much more than I do from my perspective. We uplift Black voices. I mentioned I have the most comprehensive plan to decarcerate. That's going to save us $400 million every year. And we're going to use that to heal our communities, to invest in education, jobs training programs, to invest in substance use treatment and overdose prevention sites to save lives, to invest in housing options so that we don't need police in these communities, and so that the mission that you are on has that much more legs. And my third platform, community oversight. I intentionally made sure that I diversified my campaign committee because that's what I'm going to do with the office. And most importantly, that's what I'm going to do with my community supervision board, my third platform. I'm going to empower Black voices. I'm going to empower Black women to help me reorganize and transform that office's policies and to oversee our commitment to holding law enforcement accountable.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, I just
same question.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Look, there's so much that needs to be done. And I'd also like to thank you all for your leadership on this. Part of the problem is that this system won't even face up to the problem. There was a bill in the state legislature to require prosecutors to start keeping correct statistics on the composition of the people that get charged and the disposition of their cases. And the current interim county attorney was one of the forces that got that bill killed. So we can't even tell what the numbers are. The first week I'm as county attorney, I'm going to require all statistics to be kept about who's being charged, how their cases are disposed, what happens with their case. So we can first just see what the problem is. I mean, we know the problem, but just to quantify it and to develop the solutions we need to do. You've also have to have a massive expansion of diversion and different programs And fundamentally, you have to stop dealing with every single problem with a police prosecution model. We've got a militarized police system that has to stop, and we need to re-put those resources into a full range of services. When we talk about things like what we're going to do with police budgets, that's perfect, but we also have to talk about how we're going to develop the other budgets for services, mental health services, addiction services. That's the way we make ourselves safer as a society and start to tackle this problem and the incredible racism that's baked in to this history. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So thank you, candidates, for answering these questions from community members. We're going to take about a 3 to 5 minute. Are we still doing the 3-minute transition to Zoraida?
Yes,
or has it reduced? Is it still 3 minutes or is it less than 3 minutes?
Yep.
And I also see that there are follow-up questions in the chat. And so if someone is please collecting those questions, so in the question and answer segment, we'll be able to ask those questions for follow-up as needed by the candidates.
Thanks, Sharifa. Yeah, we should be able to pan over to Zoraida and check out what's going on over there.
Thank you.
Zoraida. Find Zoraida.
Here I am.
Hi, Zoraida.
Hello.
Everybody could just take a moment. Zoraida, if you can talk for a second, and if anybody is able to double click on her image, you'll be able to pin her to your screen and see Zoraida's work.
So what I'm doing now is I am graphically turning the values that the candidates talked about into images. For example, for Julie McGungle, she talked about violent crimes against women, being tough on violent crimes against elderly women and children, about ending cash bail and ending private prisons, and then doing reform programs for low marijuana prosecution, young adults, and for mental health issues. And I'm in the throes now of trying to capture Mr. McKnight's statements, especially the ones he talked about, the pipeline, the prison to school to prison pipeline. So I'm gonna get back to it.
Back to you, Sharifa.
Thank you, Zoraida. Isn't that beautiful? It's not just beautiful to like see that coming together, hearing everyone's voice and really having a visual of what's to come. So we are going to move into our round around policy, deep dive into policy. And I want to take this time to introduce Talima Flores from Mass Liberation, Arizona, who will ground us in the policy questions. In this order, Will be going first, and then it will be, we're just basically moving it down. So it'll be Will, Bob, Julie, right? Any of you who have kids, you know, the rotation first, and then you know, push it down. So will start first, and then Bob will move into second, and Julie will move down to third. Okay. And Talima?
Thank you, Sharifa. Peace, everyone. I do apologize for the technical difficulties. You can't see me right now, but I am here with you, and I thank you all for being with us tonight. Lola introduced us to our 10-point platform earlier, so now we're just going to focus on 3 of the demands from our community that we want to know the most about. I'm going to take a moment and ground us in an understanding of the issue, and then ask the questions pertaining to the demand. So please let us know any policy promises and actual plans you have around this issue. The first issue is the death penalty. Many folks in Arizona oppose the death penalty. We haven't used it in many years, but the only reason why is because of the moratorium issue on the medications. Also, natural life sentences are honestly no different from the death penalty because the person is sentenced to die in prison. We oppose the death penalty because we center healing and personal transformation. So our question to you is, what are your plans, if any, to address our community demand to end the death penalty and natural life sentences in Arizona?
So Will, you can start with that question. Did you hear the question?
There we go. I did. Thank you so much for the question, Talima. Let me be clear. I am the only candidate in this race on either side of the political aisle who is committed to not applying the death penalty, period. The death penalty is racist. 50% of the death verdicts last year were rendered against people of color, 30% against Black people. It's colossally expensive, and it's a disservice to victims who live in limbo for decades while those cases are appealed, never knowing if they're going to have to relive the trauma of a trial. And it's a disservice to all the other things we could be doing with those resources. So I'm committed to that, and I'm also committed to changing the policies in that office. Even though I'm not going to apply it, I'm going to make it so much harder for the next Maricopa County attorney. They're going to have to pay a political price to unwind the way I change how they are, according to their own policies, allowed to even try to use it. Then we're going to give data to the legislature, and hopefully they will be able to repeal it. Natural life sentences, also very problematic. There's broad scientific consensus that people essentially age out of criminal behavior in their 50s and 60s. I'm committed to reducing our contribution by 50%, and part of that is reducing the length of sentences that we're using when we have no choice but to send somebody to prison, when there is no other option, when we've failed that person that much. With juveniles in particular, we are never going to impose natural life sentences. Thank you.
Bob needs to be unmuted. Hey Google, stop timer.
Hello? Yeah. I have spent my entire life fighting the death penalty in one way or the other. I'm the only candidate here who's actually had a death penalty trial, and more than one. I'm first chair qualified to defend death penalty cases. Every day I thank God that we were good enough and lucky enough that I never had to go with a client down to Florence and sit in a waiting room and watch them receive the penalty because we were successful. But it is horrible in every way I can imagine. Maricopa County is in the top 99.5 percentile of jurisdictions seeking the death penalty. We are truly a death jurisdiction. And the numbers are just staggering. Right now, there are 43 death cases in this county. A county this size, even if you accepted that, should have around 5. And it's something that I will fight. Unfortunately, I believe that the legislature has to repeal it. It doesn't matter how many policies that you put in, the next county attorney in a heartbeat can change those and reimpose it. I am committing to keeping the statistics in the record and going to the legislature every session, every week, and arguing for the death penalty's repeal. Unfortunately, that's the way it has to happen. I think we can develop the consensus to make that happen, and that is what I'm committed to doing. And relating this to the issue of life imprisonment, what the county attorney is doing is fundamentally illegal. They're using the death penalty as a bargaining chip to get people to plead to life without parole. That should not happen at all. Nobody is beyond redemption, and people do age out of criminality, and that has to be accounted for, and redemption has to be.
Sharifa, your sound.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. Julie, if you could unmute Julie. Same question.
Same question. I mean, we have to start with the fact that the real situation is our system is broken from day one for so many people, for Black, Indigenous, Latinx, trans, LGBTQ+ communities. Our system is broken. And I acknowledge that there is significant literature that shows the abject failure of the death penalty as a policy. It fails as a deterrent. There's a lack of effective drugs. There have been countless exonerations because of actual innocence. not to understate the giant racial disparity that there is in seeking the death penalty. And I think it is shameful that our county attorney ranks in that 99th percentile and has used this as the ultimate bargaining chip instead of the ultimate penalty. I am committed to a thorough review of every single pending death penalty case, and it is a non-starter until we can solve some of these systemic problems. I do, however, believe that there are rare instances where a prosecutor should have this ability, and I have not seen that case in the last several years or decades come across the county attorney's desk where it should even be an option. I also agree that we need to have significant options other than life without parole and natural life in particular, and I am committed to not seeking natural life in any juvenile case, and have been a big proponent of raise the age legislation and other juvenile justice reforms as well.
Thank you, Julie. Salima? Salima?
Okay, thank you. The second question is going to be around cash bail. So one of our values at Mass Liberation AZ is putting people before property. So many people get caught up in the system because, so many people that are caught up in the system are too poor to afford bail. So they end up spending longer periods of time in jail while they're fighting their cases. So our question to you is, what are your plans, if any, to address our community's demand to end cash bail?
Thanks again, Talima. I agree. Money bail is fundamentally un-American. Our system was built on the ideal of innocent until proven guilty. Money bail creates a two-tiered system where only the wealthy can go free, but the poor are coerced into guilty pleas, like you said. After 72 hours, we know that pretrial detention is statistically proven to make us less safe. It actually increases crime and recidivism, and it does nothing to actually facilitate continued appearance. It's not about that. It's not about community safety. So I strongly support a departure from our money bail system in its entirety, and my promise is that I'm not going to ask for money bail, period, day one. But it's going to be a fight, make no mistake. Our courts pushed back against a similar effort in 2016 that was pushed by the Chief Justice of the courts, the Task Force on Fair Justice for All. So anyone who promises they will end cash bail on day one is promising more than they can deliver. Our rules of procedure, our statutes, and our Constitution empower the courts to make decisions. Prosecutors are powerful, don't get me wrong, but I do anticipate there will be some pushback. So my promise is to stop asking for cash bail and to work in partnership with our public defenders to achieve justice here if the courts don't want to play ball with us. I have a strong relationship with our public defenders' offices. As a former public defender, I've already laid the groundwork to work together with them on exchange programs. I'm going to fight for pay parity to make sure defendants have access to adequately and equally compensated, effective assistance of counsel to help get them out of custody with no bail. And I promise to work with our activist community, the many bail funds that already exist. In fact, I already have. I've been working during the pandemic and the protests to get Black and brown people out of jail and out of pretrial detention. And again,
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Will. The next candidate that will answer this question, Bob.
Yes, hi. Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more with what Will just said. We have to end the asking for cash bail. There are several different systems in the country. The Bail Reform Act and the federal system, for instance, doesn't have cash bail, except in the rarest of circumstances. If the argument is you need to get somebody to court to make their hearing, give them a $30 Uber voucher and give them the text of their court appearance, and they will make it to court. The dirty secret about what is really going on here, in addition to just supporting the bail bond industry, is that they put people in prison in order to coerce plea agreements out of them. Because this system knows that if you're out and not in custody, you're more likely to fight your case, and you may be able to assert the justice of your cause. And they want to avoid that, so they put people in jail. We at any given time have 7,000 to 8,000 people in the Maricopa County jail, and this is just absurd. That costs $46,000 a year per person of taxpayer money. This is racially biased. It is a regressive tax on the poor, and it is utterly unnecessary to make anybody safe from crime. There are a few people that need to be detained pre-trial, but it should not be based on whether they can pay their bail or not. It should be based on if they're assessed as a danger or not to themselves or others. But beyond that, that is a small number. The rest has to stop. This is a fundamental question of not just racial justice, but economic justice. And that has to change. And you're going to have systemic changes, including possible changes in the Arizona Constitution.
Thank you, Bob. With 15 more seconds to spare. Julie? Same question.
Yes, we need to stop asking for cash bail. It's, as a matter of policy, something our prosecutors can do as on day one. And then being that voice at the legislature to make sure that we get the changes that we need in statute in order to make this permanent and powerful. Because at the end of the day, an effort to end cash bail could easily be undermined by the judiciary or rogue prosecutors, and would not necessarily translate across our state, which is what we need to see. I view cash bail as the criminalization of poverty, but let's talk for a second about why it continues to be an issue in the United States. Because those jurisdictions that operate without cash bail have shown their success. People still continue to show up to court. The only thing that they see is that people are increasingly not coerced into pleas. And one of the big reasons why we continue to have cash bail here in Arizona is that bail and bonds have a powerful lobby and give campaign donations. So as a matter of clarity and public corruption, we need to address the money and the perverse incentives in this system to keep cash bail afloat.
Thank you, Julie. Still with 47 seconds to spare. So, Talima, we're going to transition into the third question.
Yes, our last question revolves around treating children like children. So studies have proven that your frontal lobes, the part that's associated with impulse and risk, doesn't fully develop in your brain until the age of 25. And so mass liberation stance is that putting people in cages is never the answer. And when science and common sense tell us that children don't think like adults, it makes no sense to put them through a system that's designed for adults. And with this in mind, what's your plan and commitment to treating children like children?
Same rotation, Will.
Trying to, there we go. Thank you again, Talima. I am committed to treating children like children. That's the easy answer. So I'm very familiar with this problem. I sit on the Commission on Access to Justice, and we're responsible for reporting our juvenile justice statistics. So I can talk all day long about the fact that Black students make up 16 to 17% of enrolled students, but account for 30% of in-school arrests. Latinx are 3 times more likely to be suspended, expelled, and referred to the criminal justice system. Native youth 1.5 times more likely. So I'm committed to treating children like children, unequivocally, period, end of story. Wherever we have discretion to do that, that is a black and white policy. And when we do not have discretion, when the law strips us of discretion, we're going to be good lawyers and we're going to try to claw it back. For example, I had a case where I represented a 16-year-old child who, like me when I was growing up, had an ACE score through the roof, and he was acting out one day after hours in a school library, started a fire, the fire got out of control, and it burned the library down. Our county attorney charged him with arson, which is a mandatory transfer offense, and alleged it as dangerous, even though nobody was in danger. That meant that the minimum sentence he could get was 5 years. And then they sought $1 million in restitution, compounded at 10% interest per year. So not only have we plucked this child during his most formative years and sent him to adult prison, but we financially ruined him. That could have been treated just as criminal damage. It could have been treated as a number of different things that would have clawed discretion back. We could have kept him in a position where he could get services and the help that he needs to be a functional adult. And that's my promise to the community.
Thank you, Will. Bob, same question.
Yeah, sorry, I was on the phone because I had a problem with my Zoom thing, so Lola had to help me. Look, what I find, what we do with children in this criminal justice system to be just appalling. And to give you some idea of the scope of the problem, we know that the adolescent brain hasn't even finished growing. The brain hasn't finished growing until 25 or 26 years old. And we're holding children accountable for what's supposed to be adult behavior. And we send children as young as 14 years old into an adult prison system. This is appalling. And to give you the idea of the forces we're up against, you as the taxpayer spend $500,000 when the interim county attorney and the county attorney before them commissioned a study to just tell everybody that somehow that's not true, that children are the same level of culpability as adults, just so they could waive this thing in court and justify imposing huge sentences on children. This is a very difficult problem because you have to make a clear statutory change. There are statutes where you charge somebody with something and they're automatically transferred to adult court. That is appalling. That has to end. Children need to be treated as children, and we cannot keep using this criminal justice system, which is bad enough the way it treats adults, but to do that with children is terrible. I have represented numerous children, both in federal court and in state court, and it's just wrong what we do, and it is a bad reflection on our society that has to end, and I'm committed to doing that. The transfer of a child to an adult system I can't think of a system where it should ever be an option and ever be a situation where we would prefer to do that rather than another option. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Julie, same question? Julie, no, she's unmuted now.
I'm unmuted now. You know, honestly, I'm uncomfortable with the starting point because when I hear treat children like children, it implies a maternalism and a paternalism over someone else's kid that I think is inappropriate. Like, your criminal justice system shouldn't be treating people, treating the system as a parent. And I think that's really wrong. I think the issue that we're trying to get at is whether or not juveniles should stay in the juvenile justice system. And I think they should. I think they should beyond even the age of 18 because of what we know now about the developing brain. The purpose of the juvenile justice system originally was rehabilitation, this idea of services. And it makes so much more sense to have services at the front end before someone even comes in contact with the juvenile justice system. It also has to do with our foster care and foster care to prison pipeline and school to prison pipeline. Because what is happening right now in our schools disproportionately redirects people of color and students of color into our criminal justice system. And I have, from day one, have been a big proponent of defunding SROs and making sure that all of that money and capital and human time is put into counselors and nurses where it belongs. For over a year, I spent nearly every weekend in one of those cages with our juveniles as part of the street law program. And I can tell you that their stories are absolutely harrowing. They know that they have no future and no lives before they even get out of the system. And we need to address it. We also need to address the ties in the foster care system, because when you look at students who are in detention, over 85% of them also have a pending dependency case and quite literally have no other family. And we're counting now on the government to make those paternalistic and maternalistic decisions for them. And I think that there's a better way.
I don't know if anybody can hear me. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Julie. We are going to, I see that there are questions that's coming up in the chat that's being collected. And so when we get to that segment, we'll have an opportunity to try to get through as many questions as possible. Salima, do you want to close out and transition to Zoraida?
Yes, I really just want to thank all of the candidates for taking your time to discuss these issues with us. Thank you for your answers. You've given us a lot to think about, and we hope that we've given you a lot to think about as well. With that, let's check in with Zoraida on the graphics.
Zoraida is working away. If you want to see closer, if you click on her screen and pin her, you should be able to see her screen up close. Zoraida, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just finished depicting their values. So we're gonna pan through each of them slowly and get really close. Next, I'm taking notes on their responses, and I will be creating that next in real time. So just same that time, same that station.
It's been muted. Okay. I think we are back to our segment. Thank you, Zoraida, for sharing that beautiful art with us. We are going to continue to our third round, which will be the question and answer round. And so we have a saying that we are more powerful. We are powerful and have a vision for our freedom. And so people are going to share their thoughts of what that freedom could look like to share with the candidates. And so there's going to be, I'm going to give some context. These questions will be for individual candidates. These questions will be for individual candidates. And so I think in this rotation, Bob is to go first, and then it's Julie, and then Will, correct? And so, Bob, I'm going to start off with the context. I'm going to read first, Bob, and then you'll be unmuted to speak, and you'll get your 2 minutes. But let me go ahead and finish the whole segment before you start to respond. It has been said that you use the N-word while presenting in consulting and continuing education class. Is this true? And if so, why would you consider this appropriate? As a leader in an office with a history, as Julie discussed, how will you work to change nope, that's the question. The question is just the one that's connected to using the N-word in continuing education class. And is this true? And if so, why would you consider this appropriate?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. The answer to the question is yes, it is true. I was wrong to do so, and I'm sorry. What the class was, I was giving a class on the history of the Constitution and slavery's role in that history. And my belief was we need to look at our racist history to understand our racist present. And during the course of that, I talked about the history of several things, including the history of the N-word. And during the discussion of the history of the N-word, I did use the N-word to describe the history. Again, I was wrong to do so. I've learned a lot from it. I've changed the nature of that talk, and I don't do that again. And I apologize for having used that in that context. It was inappropriate of me to do so.
Thank you, Bob. Am I just to move on to Julie's question?
Sharif, I think we should allow if anyone wants to chime in. We have time allotted for the candidates if anyone else.
Yeah, I think so. Is there anyone who you want to chime in that you're going to, or someone raise their hand to chime in to be unmuted? There's some people.
Go ahead, Will Knight. You've been unmuted.
Will Knight to respond.
I just want to thank Bob for apologizing. That's what I've been waiting for you to say for a long time now. I will ask you, when you made this change, when did that happen? Because the last time we talked about anything like this, you accused me of race baiting you. And so that demonstrated that you hadn't learned anything, and that was just a few months ago. I'd like to know more about how you got to this point of learning and realized that what you said was wrong.
You're welcome to respond, Bob, but you're not required to. This is not an opportunity for you to discuss other questions.
Julie, do you have anything? Oh, Bob is going to respond.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't remember having a discussion with you about this specific issue. This is the first time this issue has come up in any forum where I've been asked about it. And yeah, I can only just reiterate what I just said. There's a broader issue here. And I want to reiterate that I've learned from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Do you have anything you want to add, or I can move on to the next question? Great. Julie, this question is from Julie. This question is for Julie. Here's the context. I'm an organizer from Cook County in Chicago. Julie, you were a prosecutor in Cook County, and now you're running for lead prosecutor in Maricopa County. For anyone who doesn't know, in 2006, Annabelle Malingo, who is a Cameroonian immigrant, worked as a Save a Life Foundation and was fired while the organization was under investigation for defrauding the state feds. Ms. Malingo recorded a phone conversation with court staff, and Julie had her arrested by signing her own arrest warrants, had her interrogated about the blog post she had posted, and asked for a bond of $500,000. Ms. Malingo spent nearly 2 years in jail, 20 months, on $500,000 bond, fighting her case that was later dismissed. She sued you and the court found you weren't entitled to immunity, and you settled out of court. All too many times, politicians do harm in one community and move away thinking that no one will know what they did. Why should anyone in Arizona trust you after you did this? This question is for Got it. Why should anyone trust you in Arizona after you've done this?
Oh my goodness. So nearly everything that you just said is not true. And I know that there is an anonymous, uncited, baseless attack memo that that has this cut and paste into it, and it looks official and it calls into question those core beliefs. I don't know where it comes from, but I know that anonymously spreading these sorts of lies is just counterproductive to what we need in Maricopa County. But to directly address what you have said, yes, there was a lawsuit against me as a prosecutor, and over a dozen other prosecutors and agencies. Prosecutors do routinely become the subject of civil lawsuits. Some are warranted, others are not. This one was dismissed with prejudice. That means it cannot be brought again. There was no finding of misconduct, and I paid nothing. For those who are curious, the suit was brought by a woman who alleged that I was part of a conspiracy involving high-level Obama officials to facilitate the theft of over $40 million that never went missing. And the fact that we're giving any airtime to what is essentially what she's put forward, a deep state conspiracy theory, I just don't think is a great use of my time. Voters are absolutely entitled to ask questions about my record of fighting corruption and standing with those who have experienced violence. But if the answer is to, cut and paste lies, and, I'd love to have a discussion with you, Alex, because this is just not at all what happened. It's not what the court found. And again, it has been dismissed with prejudice. There was no finding of misconduct, and I paid nothing.
Okay, I was muted. So I wanted to make sure specifically so that you did or did not have Malongo arrested. Is that true or false? You did not have Malongo arrested?
I did not have someone arrested. I think is a really interesting way to put it.
That's the question, Julie. Julie, I'm not trying to indict you. All I'm trying to do is make sure that the questions that were asked of you that you say are false are actually the ones that you are saying that are false. So the first one was, did you have Malongo arrested?
No,
did you say no, you did not have her arrested?
I was involved with her prosecution, but I did not direct any arrests. That's not true.
Did you sign any of your own arrest warrants?
No, no prosecutor ever signs their own arrest warrants.
Okay. And then was she placed on what you supported, was she put on a $500,000 bond that led to 20 months in jail or 2 years in jail?
She was in jail for 20 months. She was put on a high bond. She was put on that bond because she threatened the federal judge.
That is a yes. And then the last one was just that, did you settle anything out of court?
I made no settlement.
Okay.
My understanding
Thank you, Julie.
is that
Julie, I promise you, I have no skin in the game. I'm not indicting you. I just wanted to be clear on what was said of you, and I just want to make sure that you're able to answer those. Okay, Lola, am I supposed to give follow-up to any of the candidates, or do I move on to the third question?
We're approaching time, but I do think it would be fair because that was the idea, was to allow folks to respond if they want to chime in. But I think that looks like it was direct.
So the candidates can have a response of 1 minute if you choose to. If you do not choose, we'll move on to the final question. Will or Bob, neither one of you are interested in responding. Okay. So we'll move on to the last question. Well, the question is pointed to Will. It's not the last question. From Andrea, this question is for Will Knight. In your interview with WQAZ earlier this year, you said you worked at the law firm that took the lead in the fight to bring marriage equality to LGBTQ people, but there are people in the community saying you actually did not work with that lawsuit. Did you or didn't you work on that case? And if not, why did you say you did?
I did work on that case. I think you're talking about EQAZ. That's the only interview like that I recall. And just to clarify, so in 2013, after the Supreme Court decided a case called Windsor that struck the Defense of Marriage Act, everybody was litigating marriage equality at the state level across the country because we were all pretty convinced that the Supreme Court wasn't going to take that case up again for a long time. So we'd have to put together some sort of patchwork. I worked at a law firm with an attorney named Sean Aiken, still a good friend of mine, fantastic lawyer, and has been helping me with my campaign. Two of the members of his Lutheran congregation, Joe Connolly and Terry Pocher, asked Sean if he would take their case. They had gotten married in California and Arizona law didn't recognize their marriage. Sean told me that he checked with the ACLU, the HRC, Lambda Legal, and everybody told him that they had no plans of litigating in Arizona. So with friends that needed help to achieve equal dignity and equal rights, Sean decided to take the case. I was a young associate, so not that I could have said no when he asked me to help, even if I wanted to, but I did want to. LGBTQ plus rights have always been very important to me. They're the rights of the Black and brown community and the dignity of my immediate relatives that we're talking about. So yes, I worked on that lawsuit. It was filed in January of 2014. It eventually included 7 couples. I helped with their adoptions. I witnessed their weddings. They came to my wedding afterward. Several months later, another lawsuit was filed by Lambda Legal. It was a cooperative lawsuit, not a competitive lawsuit. They were complementary, and their lead counsel, Jenny Pizer, had been helping with our case before they filed that one, and we continued to work together all the way to the end. Eventually, both lawsuits were successful, and the judge ruled of us both victorious in both consolidated lawsuits in October of 2014. So I've never misrepresented any of my involvement or even overstated it. I know I'm a cisgender heterosexual man, but as a lifelong ally to the LGBTQ plus community, it remains one of the greatest privileges and honors of my career to have been a part of that. And I'm truly sorry if my involvement in that has hurt anyone, but I didn't lie about it.
Does any of the other candidates want to follow up? You can have 1 minute to respond to this if you like. If not, we'll move on to the rest of our community questions. Julie, move on or respond? Perfect. So this next question is a community question. What specifically will you do to eliminate reduced crimes of police brutality? I am okay to move on to the next segment, Lola, correct? Of the community questions.
Yeah, I think though that we were going to, I think we're about to close up. Unless
okay.
We have time for one more question if you want to do one more. But I was trying to flag you that it's time to transition into.
Sure, I'm looking at this agenda that says 8:05 until. So if we're closing up sooner, great. I'll give each of the candidates time to answer this last question. Did you hear it? What specifically will you do to eliminate crimes of police brutality? Bob, Julie, or Will? I think Julie's the only one unmuted now, so if you want to go first.
Sure.
Oh, Bob, there you go, Bob. Oh. Go, Julie, sorry.
I'm sorry, would you like me to go first or Julie?
Sure.
Oh, okay, well, the first answer to that is prosecute them. I mean, for God's sake, prosecute them. I wrote a op-ed, again, I'm going to mention Antonio Arce. When the current interim county attorney decided not to prosecute the police officer that shot that child in the back for having a toy gun, I found 2 things appalling. One, that officer was not charged, but number 2, the process was closed. It was all done in secret in the prosecutor's office. I'm going to have a committee and a board of people from the communities most affected come in and advise on that.